Hello and welcome to this recording of How to Think Like a Recruiter. My name's Annie and I'm going to be guiding you through this recording today. So in this session, I want to help you really get under the skin of what you're experiencing as a candidate looks like from a recruiter or an employer's point of view. So to do that, I'm going to guide you through what a typical graduate recruitment process works from start to finish. And we're then going to focus on some top tips. Now, one of my key takeaways from today's session is all about research, doing research on the jobs and the employer and the sector that you're applying for. And this is really key if you want to make yourself stand out from the crowd. We're also going to have a look at some specific tips in relation to video interviews and also think about final interview questions and how you can really unpick what you're being asked, again, so you can make sure that you're answering the right question and making sure that you stand out to the employer that you're putting yourself forward to. So, to get us started, we're going to have a look at what a typical recruitment process looks like and what you're experiencing as a candidate looks like from the business's point of view. So this is a typical recruitment funnel and shows how a business will progress candidates from the initial application stage all the way through to being a new employee starting work. And a funnel like this will typically be built from the bottom up, and you might notice that most of the levels increase by about 2/3 as you go up the stages. So if we start with offers and acceptances at the bottom, if we want 4 people to start in our business, we'd usually make around 5 offers and assume that at least 1 candidate will pull out. And this happens more often than you'd like to think. 1 out of 5 is actually quite a conservative estimate. So if we're wanting to make those 5 offers, we'd need to see around three times as many candidates at an assessment centre stage. And to get those 15 candidates at an assessment centre, we need to invite 3 times that again to an earlier stage, which is usually a video interview or a telephone interview. Now, the top tier is the trickiest bit because this is the bit that we can't control, us as recruiters, as employers, but also you as candidates. If we want 45 candidates on a video interview, then we want to receive at least 135 applications. Now, why is this important? Well, we might get more than that, and often we'll get fewer, but this is something that we as recruiters, and as I said, yourselves as candidates, can't control. But what recruiters can control is who goes through to the next stage. So if you get through an application or a CV screening stage and onto the next level, you have passed the most statistically competitive stage and are in with a far higher chance of securing the role. If I've read your application and invited you through to the next stage of the process, I realistically think that you are capable of doing the job and I want to see more of you. So putting in the work up front will really stand you in good stead as you go through the rest of the process. So that recruitment funnel is the first bit of context I wanted to share with you before we get into the top tricks and tips for how to perform well in a recruitment process. And this is the second bit of context I want to share with you today. There are certain universal screening principles that we use as recruiters, as employers, to ensure that job applicants are processed in a fair and legal way. So this might seem a little dry, but it's hopefully important and helpful to know. As someone applying for a job, you can be reassured that when you do so, most employers will follow these basic rules. Firstly, they'll want to be fair, objective, and legal. It's better for their business reputation if they are, and that also means that they should get the best candidates for the role. Secondly, there may be minimum criteria such as certain qualifications, a driving licence perhaps, that work as a yes-no criteria for whether you'll be progressed. And these should be clearly stated on the job description. Thirdly, in addition to these kind of clear yes-no criteria, do you have a degree or not, employers typically use indicators, which are signs within your CV or application that you meet a certain skill. So, for example, if you were to apply for a role and that role said it required good analysis skills, an employer's indicator might be looking for a previous role you've had with analytical components, or looking at your degree to see if you've had to do any form of analysis. So you can see these clearly stated again in the job description, and you can make sure that in your CV and application you have the evidence that will meet these indicators that the employer is looking for. Finally, power and frequency. So this refers to the evidence that you give when you're writing your application. The evidence that you're giving to kind of reference those indicators and competencies that they're looking for. So if I asked you about determination in the job application, one person might say they spent a summer training for a marathon and got a personal best when they ran it, and maybe they raised some money for charity too. Lovely. Shows that you're determined to reach quite a significant goal. Someone else might say that they've worked part-time in Tesco from year 11 all the way through to their final year at university in order to support themselves during their studies. This also shows determination. So the first example is powerful. It's a strong example because it's a great achievement, but it's over a relatively short time period. The second example, however, shows consistency, a long-term effort to reach a goal that's required determination over a longer period of time. So the first of those examples demonstrated that power with strength of evidence, and the second showed frequency, that consistency over a longer period of time. If you can pick examples that demonstrate both of these things, or perhaps have a couple of examples, one demonstrating power and another frequency, that's really going to help you stand out and impress the employers in your applications. So, with our slightly dry but super important context out of the way, I'm now going to share with you our recipe for success when it comes to applying for jobs. And we're going to work through each of these stages across this recording. So let's start with the obvious. If we want to secure a suitable role, we need to start by sourcing a suitable role. But what do I mean by this? I hear lots of students saying that they've not heard back from employers, that they've had numerous rejections, or that they're just not having much luck. Often, when I dig into it, these individuals are applying to a huge number of roles with the same CV, the same covering letter, or just copying and pasting the same application content into job applications without amending it, without tailoring it to the job itself. So when I say source a suitable role, I mean really spending time looking for jobs that fit with your values and your interests and seem like they will genuinely be fulfilling or fit with your career ambitions. And then you want to go on to spending time tailoring your application to really fit that role and the business. So I'm not saying that you have to immediately identify your dream job, because that's certainly easier said than done. And lots of us don't know exactly where we want to be from the start. But what I am saying is that you'll have far more success with fewer well-researched applications than with a sort of high volume of one-click apply opportunities where you've sent out a generic CV and copy and pasted your application. So where can you find placement or graduate level roles? Here are some of the most common places to look, and this is on top of your University Career Service jobs board and any job alerts that you can receive from your university by email. So do make sure that you're signed up to those that you can receive from your university. Most universities will be able to support you for usually up to 3 to 5 years post-graduation, and some have even extended that to be a lifetime service. So even if you have already graduated, do get back in touch and work out what there is on offer at your university. But a few of the other services that are available to you outside of your university. So Indeed, the UK's largest job site, can be some people's first port of call. It's great because it has so many opportunities listed there, but it can be a real mixed bag, particularly for graduate jobs. LinkedIn, it's very popular with graduate employers now, but do make sure you've got an up-to-date LinkedIn profile and really use it actively. If you make a LinkedIn profile, it doesn't mean that the job offers are going to come pouring in. It is a tool that you can use to search for employers that might be recruiting, to have a look. Use the alumni tool to find out what people like you from your university are doing now, see if you can get in touch with them. It's a really great research tool. If you're interested in a particular sector or a particular business, you can find out what's going on, the kind of blogs and events that are running in that area. So it can be really helpful, but you do have to use it actively. A couple of others here. We've got GradCracker, which is the UK's career website specifically for kind of STEM students and graduates. So that's quite a specific one, but really great if you're looking to go into those science, technology, engineering, maths kind of roles. Prospects comes really highly recommended. I work closely with them, as well as advertising job opportunities. They also have lots of articles, tips, kind of advice for finding paths into specific areas, what you might need to go into specific careers. So that's really helpful in terms of those resources, as well as the job adverts that they put up. We've also got Glassdoor for reviews. It's a bit like a sort of TripAdvisor for jobs, which can be really helpful when you're doing your research or wanting to kind of get a feel of what a particular organisation might be like to work for. But do remember to take these with a bit of a pinch of salt. We're always more inclined to pipe up when we're unhappy than when we're impressed. And finally, we've got Student Circus, which is a great protocol if you're looking for opportunities as an international student who requires visa sponsorship. So I know there's some others up there and there are more out there, but we couldn't mention them all today. So I just wanted to give you a taste of where you can look, where you can start when you're looking to source that suitable role. So next up in our recipe for success, once you've found a couple of jobs that you'd like to apply for, now is the time to put those research skills that you've no doubt honed on your degree course to good use. So employers often say that they're looking for passion, and this can be quite frustrating to hear. How do you demonstrate passion? Our opinion is that research is what equals passion. If a candidate has shown real interest, sort of professional curiosity in a role, has dug into the information available about the role and the business, and approached an application or turned up to an interview with a range of insights about the sector, and crucially questions about the role and the company, this will be interpreted as having passion. So a top tip for you here is to make sure that your research extends beyond the company website. That's where everybody is going to look. So if you're the sixth candidate to parrot the same few statistics and quotes from the company website during an interview, it will not be looked upon favourably. So be creative with your search. The internet is a big place, so there's no excuse for only looking as far as the website. You might want to think about looking at Glassdoor, as I've already mentioned, social media, particularly the LinkedIn alumni tool. Get in touch with some people who are working at the business or in the sector. Ask for a 15-minute chat. It's so rare that people do that. That more often than not, people will be more than willing to give you the time to have that conversation, and you will really help yourself stand out and put yourself above other candidates if you do take the time to go that little bit further in your research. Industry news, have a look if people from the company are writing blogs. What about their competitors? Are there any case studies that you can find and do a little bit more research into the clients that they're working with, perhaps? All of these are ways that you can really be creative with your research and go beyond the website and the kind of typical tools that all the other candidates will be using. So why is this important? Don't just take my word for it. I want to share this graph with you. This graph comes from the Institute of Student Employers, and it shows that by far the most common reason that candidates are not successful when they apply for a job is that their applications are not tailored to the role. So this is all about research, looking at that job description, specifically what skills are they looking for? How can you evidence these, and how can you show that you've really demonstrated that passion through your research for the role itself? So if that's the reason that most students are not getting the jobs that they applied for, by taking this tip, by taking this step and doing that research, you can really put yourself above the other candidates. And on that note, next in our recipe for success, making yourself stand out. As we've said, sometimes roles get hundreds of applications and other times they just get a handful. And you shouldn't worry about this because you can't control it. But what you can control is how well you stand out from the crowd. So I want you to have a think about now what impresses employers in applications. How is it that we can make ourselves stand out when we're applying to jobs? And I'm going to go through some of the top tips in relation to this area now. So these are some of the main things recruiters tend to see from standout candidates. And that first one, as we've already mentioned, is tailored and targeted applications, making sure that your CV is specific to this role, demonstrating really clearly through examples the skills and experience that they're looking for. And it comes back to research. And that second point, understanding the role and company, going back to the effective research you're doing, knowing what the day-to-day job entails, thinking about different areas of work the company is focusing on, and what they're delivering at the moment, challenges facing the sector, really going beyond what you might kind of initially think of as that preparation you need to do for your application. Next up, appropriate skills. So think about those indicators we were talking about at the start. What are the competencies that they're looking for? These should be clearly listed in the job advert. And once you've identified what those skills are, what that kind of knowledge and experience they're looking for is, you need to identify evidence, real examples from your previous work experience, from your time at university, from other extracurricular activities that you've done that can demonstrate those skills. It doesn't have to be direct work experience in the sector itself. Lots of these skills at graduate level particularly will be transferable. They will be thinking about teamwork, communication skills, problem solving, and all of these things can be demonstrated through your degree, through your other interests, perhaps through a part-time job that you've had. So don't worry if you don't have direct experience in the industry, although of course if you do talk about it. But these appropriate skills and the evidence for them can be found in all sorts of different places. Next up, honesty and realism. You are applying for a graduate job. They're not expecting you to have all the experience in the world. So you want to be honest and upfront about that. But equally, think about your values. Does this company match those? For example, if one of your values is about ethics, you might not want to apply to work for a tobacco company or a defence sector. And equally, if work-life balance is really important to you, then you probably wouldn't choose a job that involves a lot of international travel or is at a sort of magic circle law firm. Perhaps you're really passionate about small businesses, local businesses. So you might want to think about applying for companies that kind of fit those interests, fit those values that you have, and that will really, really shine through in your application. As we've already mentioned, if you do have relevant work experience in the sector, make sure to talk about this. But equally important and much more common for graduate level roles is that transferable work experience that you might have, volunteering, extracurricular activities, part-time job, projects on your course, your dissertation, and think about all the skills that you've gained from these things that can be applied to the job. They're just as relevant and can even come across as more impressive if you've got a range of these different examples to draw from. And finally, but certainly last but not least, If you are applying for a coding job, say, and there are mistakes in your application, as an employer, as a recruiter, I'm going to suspect that there will be mistakes in your code. And similarly, if you are applying for a marketing role and you're going to be managing the social media, those mistakes, those formatting, spelling, grammar mistakes, are they going to transfer to the posts that you're putting out to the members of the public? So it's really important to focus on that attention to detail, that spelling and grammar in your CV, in your applications, because any mistakes in your job application could be penalised you could be penalised for this, as they might see it as a reflection of how you would act in the role. But not to worry if this isn't your strong point. By reading over your application again, by talking to a friend or a colleague, a peer that you know is particularly strong in this area, just a second pair of eyes to double check for any mistakes. Working with your careers service to check how you should be formatting a CV or an application. All these things can really help you to make sure that the application you're putting in is the best it can be. So moving on now to the kinds of questions you might be asked in a recruitment process. This could be at any stage of the process. It could be in the application itself. It could be at a video or a telephone interview, an assessment centre, or that final interview with an employer. Whatever stage of the process we're talking about, the most common questions tend to centre around the following areas. So teamwork is a really common one in graduate applications, and actually one that candidates can slip up on quite a lot. It's something that I'm sure all of you have the ability to demonstrate, but it's really thinking about breaking it down. What are they asking for? Perhaps it's your ability to work with diverse teams, to show that you can delegate, listen and understand to different points of view, identify strengths of different team members. So there's lots of different aspects to teamwork, as well as just simply having an example of a time that you've worked in a group. Other examples of common themes, common competencies that questions might be focused around are communication, efficiency, initiative, take sort of problem solving, and motivation. So we're going to have a look at one of these examples now, and then you're welcome to go away and do the same for some of the other areas. Really think about breaking down what might be really being asked by certain questions. So we're going to think about the competency efficiency. And here's a sort of sample question that you might be asked relating to this area. So the question is, tell me about a time you have successfully completed a project with a challenging deadline. So let's break this question down, unpick what it's really asking. You can think about some of the key words in that question. So we've got the word project, thinking about completing a project. So what was the project? You can briefly state this, but more importantly, what was your role within it? What actions did you take to ensure the success of that project? Whether that was management of resources, working with other team members or stakeholders, or keeping an eye on the overall goal. We ask about the deadline, that challenging deadline. So think about time management, how you planned it, your flexibility. Did you have to overcome any barriers or unexpected challenges in relation to that project and that deadline? And finally, success. It asks about a time that you've successfully completed a project. How did you measure success? How did you ensure that your work was effective as well as efficient despite those challenges of the deadline? And what was the result of this? So some of those key areas that an employer might be asking for if they're looking for you to demonstrate efficiency are about maintaining that focus, that overarching focus on quality, on that kind of effective use of resources, despite having limitations. How did you kind of prioritize and evaluate what would be the most effective and the most efficient? And finally, it's about structuring and planning, making sure that you were able to plan those different tasks, prioritise in order to meet that deadline. And finally, a kind of key area that you can add on to any of these questions in order to really demonstrate your depth of insight is about your learning. What did you learn from this example? From this time that you completed a project with a challenging deadline, what were the learning points? Is there anything you would do differently next time? Have you since implemented something in a different project that you learned from this particular example? And by really digging in and thinking about unpicking what might be coming behind this question, you can really ensure that your answer has a depth to it and is a really high quality answer that will stand out from the crowd. So finally, in the last few minutes of this recording, we're going to think about video interviews. We're going to think about preparation and how we prepare for these things, but it's important to note that lots of these tips are relevant to all sections of the recruitment process. So a little bit of background on video interviews. There's two types that you might be familiar with. A video interview that runs, for example, over Zoom or Microsoft Teams, where you and the employer are both live on the video interview and speaking to each other in real time. Essentially, it's like a normal face-to-face interview, except over video rather than in person. But the kinds of video interviews we're going to focus on specifically right now are a little bit different. They tend to be over a kind of web platform like Sonru, Shortlister, HireView. Those are some of the popular platforms you might recognise. And often these video interviews are pre-written, sometimes pre-recorded, and you log on at a time that's convenient to yourself and record your answers. Once you're done, the recruiter can log on at their convenience and watch and score their answers and decide if they want to progress you through to the next stage of the process. So why do employers choose to use these pre-recorded video interviews? First up, it's a really good use of staff time. It's time and cost effective. If somebody doesn't turn up to a live telephone interview, that can be a real waste of time waiting for them. But this isn't the case for a video interview. We wait for you to be ready to complete the interview, and then we're able to review it at our convenience. And for this reason, they can also be more fair and flexible for you as a candidate. When we give you a telephone interview, you have to be ready during office hours to do this. But for a video interview, you can do it whenever you want, within an allocated time frame, in a place that you feel safe, so you can fit it around your other responsibilities. Many video interviews also allow for practice, so that can be a really good opportunity for you. And everybody gets exactly the same questions in exactly the same style, so you won't have a tired recruiter who's had 5 other interviews earlier in the day asking the same questions but in a slightly more bored and flat tone. And finally, better data. If they're all recorded, if anything is queried or challenged, there's a recording that you can go back to and review. We can do that as the recruiter, but it's also a tool that you can use, and often that recording's available for you, perhaps to review it with a trusted friend or a colleague, or take it to your career service to improve for next time. So what are my top tips for video interview? The first one is all about practice, making sure that you have given it a go before the real thing. That might be using the platform that is available to you. There's often a practice option there, but it might just be using your phone to record a video of yourself answering some of the questions that you anticipate might come up in relation to the competencies that they're looking for. But aside from that practice, which really is key, this is the first of my top tips. Get dressed. It might sound obvious, but I've got some horror stories about candidates not stopping the recording of their videos soon enough, and we get a nice view of them in their pyjamas, which, safe to say, doesn't give the best impression, or somebody wearing a hoodie tucked right over their face so you can't really see them. But on a more serious note, getting fully dressed as if you're going out to do a face-to-face interview, will really help you to get in the right mindset for the video recording and do a better job. Next up, we all remember this famous moment, and there's been loads more like this recently. There's nothing worse than one of your parents walking in with a pile of washing when you're in the middle of your interview, or a housemate sort of plodding through in their pyjamas ready to get their breakfast. So if you share a house with anyone or live with family, warn them that you're recording an interview. Put a note on your door if you have to, so you can give yourself that time and space to do your best and to not be interrupted. Next up, always check your lighting before you hit record to make sure you don't look like you're shooting a horror movie. Essentially, you don't want to look like you're telling ghost stories around a campfire. Often video interviews also pick up on body language and your engagement with the interview. And that can be really difficult to demonstrate if you actually can't be seen because of something as simple as the lighting. And that goes for the other elements of technology too. You want to check that your video, your audio is all working and is all going to give you the best chance of putting your best foot forwards. Finally, your background. There's loads of advice out there about shooting great videos from your own home, and backgrounds are really important to this. We've seen clothes areas full of underwear, heaps of sort of washing on an unmade bed, and again, it doesn't come across as particularly professional. So try and make your background as simple and as professional as possible so the recruiter isn't getting distracted by all your clutter. So overall, my top tip for any stage of the recruitment process is practice. Ultimately, in recruitment, there are very small margins between success and failure. You will experience rejections along the way, and that doesn't mean that you couldn't have done the job. It doesn't even mean that the other person was better than you. It likely means that they were better at doing their research, articulating how their skills and experiences matched those on the job description. It means that they were better at playing the recruitment game. So thinking about all of the things we've talked about in today's video, doing your research, practicing before video interviews, linking the skills that you've gained at university through your societies and your part-time jobs in kind of group projects to what they're looking for. Take a little bit longer, tailoring and targeting each application. It may not mean success every time, but that is how you prepare for future success. And ultimately, you only need to get that one job. So thanks so much for watching this video today. I really hope you found something useful to take away to aid you in your future job applications. Best of luck and goodbye.